The single most commonly asked question that I receive is this: Dave, I'm interested in transitioning into a formal analytics role, something like a data analyst or a data scientist. How do I do that? Now, my answer to this is twofold. First up, I have experience as a hands-on analytics professional. I've also been an analytics manager, an analytics hiring manager, so I'm certainly qualified to provide career advice in response to that question. However, I always advise people to get a diversity of opinion. Ask other folks in the industry, not just me, for their opinions on that particular question, and then synthesize all the answers you get to arrive at something that works best for you. So I'm going to give you my answer to this question, but it's not the only possible answer. So that's number one. Two, you start with market research. This video will be the first in a series of videos where I conduct market research into the job descriptions for analytics related positions at companies like Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, that sort of thing. I will teach you a process in this video, which I will repeat in subsequent videos, by the way, that I've used for more than 20 years. Back in the day, I used to be a software engineer, and I would say, hey, I would like to be a software engineer at Microsoft, let's say. I would actually use this technique to understand what tools and technologies I should be focusing on in order to raise my ability to be a compelling job candidate to land a job at Microsoft as a software engineer. So it's the same exact process I've been using for a long time. And as I mentioned, it's relatively easy. What you do is you just go to a company that you would like to work for, or you can imagine yourself working for, and you look at their job descriptions and you analyze them. And now this is a qualitative analysis, and I need to make one thing crystal clear. What you're going to see in this video is a reflection of a point in time and me, because you might conduct this process yourself and come up with different results, and that's totally expected and totally okay. It's the process, this market research process, which is most important, not necessarily replicating the exact results you see in this video. Enough of that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, you can see here that I am in a real-life Amazon Senior Data Analyst job description. So the subject of this video, of course, based on the title, is analyzing data analyst jobs at Amazon. And you can see the process right here. I went to Amazon's website, I went to the career section, and I typed in senior data analyst as a search term. And this is one of the job descriptions that came back. Now I've highlighted the title here because this is important. How do I put this? As annoying as it is, hiring managers often get creative in their titles, in the actual text of the job descriptions, and oftentimes at the same company, very similar roles might have different titles, and they might have significantly different job descriptions, when in fact, in practice, the day in and day out activities are basically the same. So for that reason, my process, the process that I'll be using in this video and in subsequent videos, is to look at multiple job descriptions. So for example, in this video, I will show you the results of looking at 25 job descriptions. They were all returned back from a similar search, senior data analyst. That was the search term. However, you get back different types of roles. So it does take some time because you got to go look at some of the job descriptions, and sometimes the titles won't make sense and you'll read them and you'll be like, oh, okay, this is totally what I was looking for in terms of a job, even though it doesn't have a data analyst title. And a lot of times you'll get back jobs that don't actually apply. So it is a process. It does take time, but it is worth it in my experience. So here's a representative job description. And we'll not focus too much on this stuff. You definitely should. What I'm going to focus on in this video and subsequent videos is predominantly the hard skills, because that's what most people ask me about. So we can see here we have basic qualifications and preferred qualifications. Now this is prototypical of any company that you're going to look at. They might use different words, but there's this idea that the hiring manager in theory has a bare minimum of skills that they are looking for to hire somebody. And then they have, preferred or desirable, that sort of thing, qualifications, which is like, look, if you also have these skills, you're an even more powerful candidate. So let's take a look at these. Education's pretty standard. So what I would definitely do is make note of this. What I usually use is an Excel spreadsheet. I'll show you what later on in the video what I mean by this. It's nothing complicated. It's nothing fancy. So you might want to keep track of the educational requirements. In general, most of the folks that I talk to have at least a bachelor's degree, and many have a master's degree. So usually the education isn't necessarily a problem. It's usually the other hard skills. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these other qualifications. So first up, 4 years building visualizations in Tableau. So Tableau, if you're not familiar, is a very popular software package for drag and drop data visualization creation. It's a very easy way to create awesome dashboards and visualizations. QuickSight is the same thing, but this is Amazon's technology, and Power BI is from Microsoft. But notice that it doesn't really say which one is preferred. It's basically saying, look, I don't care. Do you have experience building data visualizations? And this will be a common theme, by the way, through this series, is that data visualization skills with a tool like Tableau or QuickSight or Power BI is important. So for me personally, I'll kind of use myself as an example going through this. Let's say hypothetically, I was trying to find a data analyst job at Amazon, and I would apply this process to myself. So I don't actually have this. I used Power BI a while back, but it's not really something I have a lot of skills in. I typically use the R programming language or Excel to create my data visualizations. This tells me that I have a gap, at least for this job description anyway, that I have a gap in my skill set that I should probably address somehow. I would probably pick Power BI myself just because I'm a Microsoft kind of person, but Tableau would work just as well. Okay, so data visualization, check. I should add that as a category to my Excel spreadsheet. So one of the jobs listed experience in a data visualization tool, right? So I'll mark it. Next up, SQL, SQL. If you're not familiar with what SQL is, it stands for Structured Query Language. SQL or SQL is the most common programming language used to access databases. And I mean databases of all kinds. Old school databases like Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle, all the way up to newfangled big data databases like Hive or Spark. And if you don't know what any of those things are, don't worry about it. Just this idea that, not surprisingly, hey, we want a data analyst to be able to write SQL queries and actually pull data from the database and then analyze it. Not surprising. So SQL. I've got pretty good SQL skills, so I'm pretty cool with that. So next up, 4 years of experience in business intelligence, data analytics, or related quantitative function. Now this kind of stuff is kind of generic. Obviously this is a senior level position, so if you were trying to break into the industry, you wouldn't necessarily have any of these things, but it is good to look at senior level positions to give you some sort of trajectory, to be like, okay, look, what are the skills that are disproportionately important at the senior level? Because that's what I should probably focus on even in the beginning, because that'll help me out. That'll make me a more powerful candidate. It'll make me a more appealing candidate. So business intelligence or data analytics or quantitative functions. So this could be a financial analyst, for example. Data analytics, maybe you work in digital marketing and you analyze data with Google Analytics. These sorts of things would qualify. They're relatively generic. Okay, let's go down to the preferred qualifications. Ability to display complex quantitative data in a simple, intuitive format and to present findings in a clear and concise manner. Okay, that's a general kind of communication thing, which totally makes sense. Do you have a track record of diving into data, discovering hidden patterns, to discover hidden patterns, and of conducting error/deviation analysis? To be honest with you, I don't even know what this part means, but I do know what this part means. Okay, and that is a few things. That would be like, can you do exploratory data analysis, which is like your very basic data analysis technique? Can you do data mining sorts of things? Like, can you do association rule mining or machine learning, or maybe something like linear regression, for example, to actually tease out hidden patterns in the data? Because that's typically what you're looking for when you're a data analyst. Proficiency with quantitative analysis and complex databases. This is kind of, what's complex? One person's complex is another person's simple. Who knows? Quantitative analysis. Now, this is also relatively generic, but likely, in my experience, includes things like basic statistics. So hypothesis testing and linear regression. That would be a prime candidate. So for example, I would find it extremely unlikely that if you didn't know, I would find it extremely unlikely that you could land a job like this if you didn't know how to do linear regression, for example. So verbal communication skills, blah, blah, blah. Managing customer expectations. This is super important in the field of analytics, by the way. This might be the most important skill of all. But we'll focus on hard skills because that's what most people ask me about. So knowledge of a wide range of APIs. If you don't know what an API is, that's essentially a way of using computer code to talk to some other external data source. That's not exactly right, but for this video, it's close enough. Programming tools and open source libraries. Okay, so this is relatively ambiguous, but what you will see throughout this video series, because I've done some analyses already for some other companies as well in preparation for this series, is this most typically means either the R programming language or the Python programming language, and your ability to conduct data analyses with the open source libraries that come with those two programming languages. So for example, I'm an R aficionado myself. This would be things like working with the tidyverse, with tidy models. Can you conduct linear regression analysis using R? Can you do machine learning, that sort of thing? So this will be a very common theme. Sometimes it'll be it'll be a basic qualification, and a lot of times it'll be preferred. So generally speaking, what this tells you is that if you want to break into analytics, having these skills is probably a leg up. It doesn't alone qualify you, but it sweetens the deal for a potential hiring manager. So this is the kind of the process that you do. And you, like I said, because of the variability in job descriptions, you look at a lot of job descriptions. I usually look at least 25, but that actually means sometimes I look at 100 job descriptions because a bunch of them won't relate. So for example, maybe a bunch of financial analyst jobs come back and you look at like maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 of those, and you're like, okay, look, generally speaking, financial analyst job postings at Amazon, it's not something I'm interested in. So you've got to look at a lot of these job descriptions. And then what you want to do is you want to narrow down to 25 that fit your career goals. And when you do that, you just basically start summing up all of the things that you see in common, and then you can stack rank the list. And let me show you what I mean by this. Here we go. This is what I mean by this. And this is an extremely simple Excel spreadsheet, but yet so wildly powerful. What I did here was I went through 25 senior level data analyst positions at Amazon. Sometimes they had the actual title, kind of like what we saw in the example job posting, and sometimes they were close, but not exactly the same thing. But what I did is I looked at them, and based on the description, based on my qualitative analysis of the description, I said, okay, this looks like something that would resonate as a senior data analyst type position. And I took a look at the hard skills and kept track of them all and then tallied them all up. And then what I did was I just ranked them in the number of times they were mentioned in each of the 25 job descriptions in descending order. What I will do here is I will go through this list and I will make an assumption, as I said earlier, that you are trying to break into an analytics role, and maybe you're very early in your journey. You don't have a statistics degree, you don't have a computer science degree, but you want to get into the data space. And you might be looking at this list and you might be saying, geez, Dave, God, that is so much stuff. And it is. It is a lot of stuff, I'm not gonna lie. However, what's great is that this technique allows you to break it down into bite-sized chunks. You focus on the stuff that's most important, and then you move on down the list as time allows you to. So once again, I'll assume that you have none of these skills whatsoever, or maybe just some basic Excel skills. Okay, let's make that assumption that you have some basic Excel skills. And what I'll do is I'll go through the list and I'll talk about each one of these things in general. And where appropriate, I will point out where I have some content that can help you out in learning these things. Okay, so first up, and this is sometimes surprising, all right? I do even today have people come to me that are interested in getting into analytics, interested in becoming like a data scientist or a data analyst or something like that. And they say, SQL, really? Because if you're not aware, SQL's been around for 30-something years now, and SQL is still a top skill. By the way, just so you know, I will be doing Facebook data scientist jobs in the next video. SQL is one of the top skills there too. This is a recurring theme, which makes total sense, right? If SQL is the primary way that a data person gets access to a database to get the raw materials for conducting analyses, it makes sense that basically it's the most popular skill, if not one of the most popular skills. It makes total sense. So SQL, learn SQL. Obviously, based on this analysis, it's a top skill. And as I said, it's a top skill at Facebook too. It's a top skill at Microsoft. It's a top skill basically everywhere. So you can't go wrong learning SQL. If you don't know SQL and you've never programmed in a formal language like SQL or R or Python before, don't worry about it. I have a tutorial series here on my YouTube channel. It'll be up here on the video. Don't click it yet though, because we're not done. But you can look at this later. And it teaches you SQL, and it's designed specifically for Excel users. Right? So you don't have a programming background, but you've worked with data in Excel. I use your Excel knowledge and I teach you SQL. So that's up there. You can take a look at that later. SQL, number one, look at that, 92. So 23 out of the 25 job descriptions either listed SQL as a basic or preferred qualification. So essentially what this should tell you is if you're gonna try to be a data analyst type person at Amazon, you better learn SQL. Okay, that's basically what it's saying. So next up, data viz. So this is the generic bucket I said that I used for anytime a job description said, hey, look, just know a data visualization tool. We don't care which one. And as we saw, the ones that are usually listed are QuickSight, which is Amazon's tech, Tableau, and Power BI. And 21 out of the 25 jobs had that listed. So that kind of tells you should probably learn a data viz tool. Right after SQL, next thing you should be taking a look at is a data viz tool. Unfortunately, I don't have any content on data visualization tools because, as I told you earlier, I either use Excel or more likely I'm using the R programming language to create my visualizations. So for me personally, I would need to find some resources and learn one of these. Excel. Okay, Microsoft Excel. Not surprisingly, it is listed in 19 of the job descriptions. Now, when I looked through all these job descriptions at Amazon, Excel, they were talking mainly around things like when they listed specifics about Excel, what they were looking for. It was things like pivot tables and Power Query and visualizations and things like that. Quantitative analysis, for example, with Excel was listed, and that's pretty ambiguous. So here's what I would say. You want to be good with Excel. You definitely want to be, at a minimum, be able to work with pivot tables and pivot charts. VLOOKUPs were mentioned. So joining tables of data, or XLOOKUP, which is the new hotness in that space. So that sort of thing, right? More than just looking at just a basic Excel table. Now, in terms of quantitative analysis, you can do a lot of statistical analyses with Excel. So I have, for example, a course, and you can look at the description below this video if you're interested, where I teach people how to do linear regression analysis using Excel. So that's a double whammy there. It qualifies not only for the Excel aspect, but also one of the aspects below, which we're talking about right here, which is stats/quantitative analysis. But I'll talk more about, more about that in a sec. So Tableau was listed 18 times. QuickSight was listed 12 times, and Power BI was listed 8 times. Those are just the visualization tools, which just goes to show you that Tableau is most definitely the market leader in this space. So you can't go wrong picking that one, even though I personally would probably pick Power BI because that's just the way I roll. However, if you're agnostic, Tableau is a great one to pick. So next up, stats/quantitative analysis. So that was mentioned in 17 of the 25 job descriptions, or 68%. So in general, you're going to want to learn this. It's listed in almost, 7 out of 10 of the job descriptions. So while not necessarily top of the list like SQL, it's pretty important. And stats quantitative analysis would be things like I mentioned earlier, hypothesis testing, and most definitely linear regression analysis. Like I said earlier, I can't imagine that any job description in this space, in this particular scenario, that lists something like this isn't going to expect that you know how to do linear regression. And as I said, I've got a course. You can check it out in the description. So scripting languages. This is a very common term that you see in job descriptions, not only at Amazon, but at other companies as well, where they talk about scripting languages. And usually what they're talking about, most of the vast majority of the time, is R or Python. They might list things like SAS or MATLAB, but that's pretty rare these days. These two are king. And notice that that this is R or Python. Rarely do you see a job in any of the descriptions that I've looked at, and I've looked at maybe 100 or so far, where they specifically say it's got to be R or it's got to be Python. You can do either or. I will freely admit that I am an R aficionado. I have been a software engineer, so I use R. I use R because I like it. I use R because I think it's great, not because I can't program in Python or Java or whatever. Can. I just like R. And specifically, one of the reasons why I like R is because in my experience training hundreds of working professionals, it is the easiest and quickest way for a Excel user, somebody who has only analyzed data using Excel, to learn a formal programming language like R or Python. It's way easier. R is way easier for somebody like that. I've got content on this, right? So I don't expect you to believe me. You can check out a video up here, about an hour length video, which shows you, okay, look, how you can go from analyzing data in Excel pivot tables and go all the way to machine learning using R. So you go from Excel to R to machine learning. Okay, anyway, enough of that. Machine learning. How convenient, based on what I just said. So machine learning was mentioned in 7 out of the 25, or roughly more than a quarter. This is a good one to take a look at as a differentiator. Obviously, it's not a requirement, right? It's only listed at 28%, whereas a scripting language is listed at 40%. However, once again, if you're interested in making your candidacy, making you the most appealing candidate in this particular space, which is data analyst jobs at Amazon, you probably can't go wrong learning a scripting language and learning some machine learning as well. Now, these jobs didn't really specify, and I would guess that the machine learning that they're interested in is pretty standard stuff, meaning not deep neural networks, not meaning AI. So that would be things like using random forests or boosted decision trees, support vector machines, that sort of thing. Not necessarily big deep neural networks, but more, as we saw earlier, right? This idea of like, can you mine interesting patterns out of the data? Machine learning is an excellent way to do that. To raise your candidacy, R or Python and some machine learning. My personal preference, because in my experience, this is by far the easiest way for any professional to acquire these skills, is for you to learn R and then use R to learn machine learning. And as I said, you can check out a video up here that I've got on this topic. Interestingly, ETL, which is just the way that you move data around between databases, basically, was listed almost in 25% of the data analyst positions, and knowledge of data warehousing was listed in 1 out of the 5 job descriptions. Okay, so like I said earlier, if you apply this process to jobs at Amazon yourself, you might get a different table with different results, and that's totally expected and totally okay. However, what I would bet $100 on this. You're going to see basically most of these same skills, if not all of them, kind of listed in the same order. SQL's top, you need data viz, there's an expectation you have some Excel skills. Can you actually do data analyses, right? That's super important. And can you do some machine learning, and can you use a programming language like R to actually pull data, massage data, and analyze data? Which, all that kind of makes intuitive sense. So like I said, if you're brand new in this space, I have some free resources. You can access them up here, and I'll also list them down below in the description. Now, the next up in the series is going to be Facebook. I'm going to analyze 25 data scientist job descriptions at Facebook. And when that's ready, the video, a link to it will appear either here or here. And that's it for this video. So do your market research. It will help you out to identify what hard skills you should invest in and more importantly, what order you should invest in them. Okay, until next time, please stay healthy, and I wish you very happy data sleuthing.